Well, this was bad news. I mean, this was very bad news because many of these people were in no position to come right back. They were preparing to come back, but not yet. But the not yet was gone. Now they had to come back and improve the land. What did that mean? Probably build a log cabin, at least, and maybe start to make clearings, cut down trees, and, kind of claim it as a little tiny, tiny farm. So they came back, and they were ill-prepared. What didn't they have? Many of them didn't have a year's worth of food. That was very risky. Many of them didn't have adequate tools. Many of them did not have oxen. Anything they did, they would have to do by hand or ask for help. Many of them, sad to say, who intended to farm, didn't have farming expertise. And yet they thought they could get a new start here as farmers in the wilderness. They were facing things that they really had not actually faced up to. And they probably knew that times would be tough, but they had no idea how tough they would be. In 1855, which was really the year after the first group came in, and they were scattered all through this wilderness of Gratiot County, there was a long wet spring and a delayed planting. The farms were so small that they did plant, but somehow squirrels and mice were able to figure out where some of these seeds had been dropped, and the planting mainly consisted of taking an axe and whacking it into the ground and dropping some kernels of corn, and then taking your foot and covering it, or taking a stick and doing the same thing. You planted wherever you thought the sunlight would come down, and that meant you planted around stumps. Some of the trees they had cut were this big around, and they simply got them down, cut the limbs off so that they would have some firewood, and they burned the main part of the tree. What do you do with it? There was no way you could saw it up. And so they burned a lot of trees, and if people had oxen, they helped drag it all together, and they probably had some pretty hefty bonfires from all the trees that needed to be burned. The problem that lasted for 5 years was a very simple problem, but it didn't have a simple solution. The problem was that no matter how many trees you could cut, and they cut all winter, you could never get a space large enough to plant enough to provide enough of a harvest to carry you through till the next harvest. And that was the whole idea of farming. You at least produced enough food for yourself. They couldn't do it because they didn't have enough cleared land to do it. It wasn't possible to do. So they found themselves in a position that maybe they had dreamed that it was going to work out. It wasn't going to work out. And so the first harvest was just pitifully small. What did they plant? Well, they probably I know they planted corn. There may have been some wheat planted. I don't know what kind it was, a winter wheat or not, or probably not, but they planted potatoes because that was one of the staples that they would live on all winter. May have planted some rutabagas. There seemed to be quite a lot of those raised on the frontier. And I don't know what else they did plant, but they didn't harvest very much simply because they hadn't been able to plant very much. And it was hard planting and working around the stumps because under the leaves that had rotted on top and a little bit of topsoil was a mat of tree roots. And so planting was quite a challenge. So these people were facing something very, very difficult. The winter of 1855 and 56 was a long winter. Now Francis Nelson and his buddy Jacob Rush had come in probably in 1854 to look for land. They were friends. They tramped around different parts of the county. They finally landed out at what now is the general area of Harrison Road and Jerome Road. On one corner there for many, many years was the Rush homestead that some of you are acquainted with. And Jacob had been helping another neighbor put a wooden floor in his cabin because many of the cabins just had dirt floors. So it may have been a puncheon floor where they took some logs and put them there and had cleaned off one side to make it flat. But in the process, Jacob had broken his leg. So he was laid up all winter. His neighbor and friend Francis realized that their oxen, because they each had a yoke of oxen, had eaten all of the browse in the woods for a great distance. They had no hay, they had no corn. These animals were skinnying down. And it was very important to winter them because they needed them for anything that, oxen would be apt to haul. And so he was very desperate, and he knew that the only place he could get corn would be down in Clinton County, where farms had been established for a while. So he walked from that location down through Maple Rapids to Clinton County and walked around trying to find a farmer that actually had corn to sell. And after a lot of walking, he came across a farmer that did have a load of corn. The next thing he needed was somebody with healthy oxen down there in a wagon that would bring the corn and deliver it out here at his log cabin. And he finally found a guy that promised to do that, but he knew that before that load of corn arrived, all their oxen could be dead. So he got a gunny sack and filled it full of some of the corn he bought, put it over his shoulder, and started walking for home. He was down in Clinton County somewhere, and he was coming up to just south of Helena. So he walked and got into Gratiot County, crossed the Maple River, and it was winter and snow began to fall. Later he said he had never seen snow fall so hard and so fast. And he continued walking and wading snow until he got within 4 miles of home, and night fell, and he stopped at somebody's cabin. He was exhausted. He'd been carrying this bag of corn and trying to get through this deep snow. By the time he stopped in the evening, the snow was up to his knees. So he had had a rough, rough day. So in the morning, he continued on home and shared his corn with Jacob so that both their yoke of oxen had some corn to eat. At least might tide him over until the guy arrived with the wagon load of corn. This is the kind of thing that they were contending with and dealing with all the time. And in some cases, people did not have those resources. And some of these winters, when they had no hay and no corn, cows died, oxen died, and they would butcher them out, getting what meat was left on the bones, and then use the hides to trade for food. So things were very, very rough, very tight. The farms, of course, were slightly enlarged over the winter. So in the spring of 1856, people had already ordered more seed, which had been brought in, and they planted again. Then, as things began to grow, a most unexpected thing happened in July of 1856. It's hard to believe, friends, but it was a damaging frost. July. And so that set things back, the corn and the potatoes and all that sort of thing. On August 28th, and that anniversary will be this coming Saturday, I believe, on August 28th, 1856, they had a killing frost. Anything that was not already mature was gone. Probably not much corn was mature. Potatoes, there might have been some in the ground, but now the potato vines and plants had frozen. So things looked very, very rough, and people who were on the margin, it was sort of like being on a loosely strung tightrope, where the slightest thing that didn't work your way would flip you off, and you were in a bad situation. And many people recognized that that was it. And so they knew that in one way or another, it was going to be almost a miracle if they survived that coming winter. Well, in October, even worse things happened. It had been a very dry latter part of the summer and fall. Almost no rain had fallen, and for whatever reason, and it could have been a quick shower with lightning, forest fires were started in the Gratiot wilderness, in the woods. And because the woods was so thick and the trees were so high, even if you had a breeze going through, the smoke generated by these fires just kind of settled in the woods and wouldn't move. And over big areas of Gratiot County came a blanket of smoke that grew and grew as the fires continued to burn. It was so bad that in a log cabin, and admittedly they probably had pitifully little windows, but in a log cabin in broad daylight they had to light a candle. The county supervisors were meeting for one of their very first meetings in Ithaca in some room, and for them to record, I suppose maybe the county clerk or whatever, to record what was going on, they had to light a candle. That